Today, I have the opportunity of speaking with Dr. Zeisner. You may have seen her on TikTok providing comedic relief and thought provoking insight to educators everywhere. And I am so thankful she is here now. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so excited to meet you in person and to celebrate education with you and to really dig deep into what's been happening and what's possible.
I love that. When I saw your videos, anytime I see them, I'm always like, oh my gosh, yes, finally someone said it, or I'm just cracking up the whole time. I love
Yeah,
it.
I try to do both. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I say to people in education, if you're not laughing, you're crying,
So
because it
true.
really is polarizing. It really is manic. It really is so individualized. There are multiple tragedy and tragic things that are happening in students' lives, K through 12. And we need to be really strong people. And sometimes laughing is the best way to get through some really tough stuff.
Absolutely. Can you give a little bit of background about yourself? How long have you
Yeah.
been in education?
Since 1993, I went to the University of Maine from Canada. I'm actually from London, Ontario, Canada, and did my post-secondary school stuff there, and then got into the University of Maine for my teaching practice, which I loved so much. It was such a fantastic program, and then went back to Canada and worked since then in a variety of roles, variety of teaching classes, special education, residential schools in Canada for those with some severe learning disabilities, eventually making my way into administration and the district leadership office, doing leadership development, and then a principal at 5 different schools. And then throughout that whole journey, I really knew I wasn't smart enough and got my doctorate, and luckily then was hired by our local university, Western University in Canada, to be an adjunct in their teachers college supporting undergrad new teachers.
Oh my
And
gosh.
eventually I said to myself, during the day I was a principal, and at night I was an adjunct professor. It was a lot. And so I said to my family, I really believe my place is in higher ed for the rest of my career. And Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, had an opportunity. And so for the last 3 years, I've been sitting here in Spokane at Gonzaga, working with their doctoral and master's students in education, which is really a fantastic opportunity to bring about change, to push thinking, and to build what I like to call scholar practitioners. So people who are practicing educators, but truly have research and data in their back pocket at all times to make better, more informed decisions.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you think back to a time before COVID, can you think of another experience of like creating this huge shift in education that we've seen due to the pandemic?
Yeah, I think if you talk to any educator, they would probably be able to tell you about a school event or a district event or a regional event or even a state event, whether it's the tragic death of a student that changed the school, maybe in some states, some horrific weather that's taken schools out. Look at what's happening in Louisiana right now. And then I think about school shootings in Sandy Hook and some of those horrible tragedies where school safety and mental health really came to the pinnacle for us. What COVID did is it made it global, that it was affecting every family and every student and every person, as opposed to more regional. And that then just put a greater spotlight on education and educators, and more importantly, the inequities amongst schools and teaching and classrooms, and then brought to the forefront the physical, emotional, mental, and financial struggles that so many people have, and the inequities with regards to access to technology, access to nutrition. We made a lot of assumptions when COVID hit, that we would just be able to move very easily from face-to-face to online learning. And especially here out in Eastern Washington, that's not the case. Their Wi-Fi is limited.
Yeah.
Families having technology is limited. Families with multiple children, and you all expect them to be taking a course right now, and you only have one computer. And so I think it really blew up assumptions that people have about learning and teaching and education.
Yeah, it was almost like you didn't face the problem because you weren't dealing with it. And then once you had to deal with it, it was like, oh, there is a problem. So thinking back to that first 2 weeks in March when we all got shut down, what was that like for your staff and for you? How do you remember those 2 weeks of the unknown?
I really do. I remember where I was standing when we got the notice that the university was going to close. I remember I love Twitter, and I got so many Twitter notifications about school boards that were about to go on their spring break and then would not be returning after spring break. And I think half the people thought, "Oh, awesome! We get a whole week to prepare for this."
That was
Okay,
me.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
lose my March break a little bit, but no worries. And then the rest of us thought, well, we're trying to move 8,000 students to an online platform. And it may be easy for students who have a great grasp on technology and using iPhones and those things. But what about professors and educators that's not in their wheelhouse, or programs which aren't really easily transferable to online? All these people who are in nursing and music and those hands-on engineering activities. And so it immediately created many more questions and many more concerns. And on the other hand, people really worried about their own health, the health of their parents, financially. How will this affect people? How will I look after my children? So it just immediately spiked anxiety in society, and certainly in my friends and family circle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you see this big impact on mental health immediately right away?
What anxiety does, because everybody experiences anxiety, it's the fear of the future, and that's okay. It means you're thinking about it. But what it did is it exasperated it for those who don't have healthy outlets, who maybe haven't sought counseling or have some really great strategies or have friends to reach out to. So, and again, it created this polarized place where some people were like, no worries, and other people were very, very upset and impacted. And you didn't know the kind, like people that you knew well, how they would handle this. And so you had to reach out, you had to ask, and you had to be a great listener and a great friend. And I was lucky. My family was okay and safe and protected. But I would certainly say some educators that I know that are concerned about how they were going to continue to engage and be great educators were the ones that really suffered and immediately went into overdrive and over panic and over planning, and had just so many questions that so many other people didn't think about. And so just trying to manage the manic world that we were living in personally and professionally was so hard for leadership.
Yeah, I think that initial manic, what are we going to do, really caused a push in the teacher burnout. And I remember I was like how you said, those first 2 weeks, I thought, oh, this is a vacation. We'll be back. Like we get 2 weeks spring break and then I'll get to see my kids again. And it wasn't like that at all. How
No.
did you guys shift from the short term, this will just be a couple weeks, to the longer term plan? What did you guys do?
The big thing that I've always asked, and I teach principal certification program here in Washington and teach educational leadership. Decisions need to be made. If you watch or talk to anyone who really suffered through this, it was because they were living in a place of no answers.
Yes.
And the organizations, the schools, the people who made a tough decision to say, we're not going to come back till the end of the year, were much better off and had much more success than those that said, we'll wait 2 weeks. Let's go another 2 weeks. Let's go another 2 weeks. That's what you saw, what that was doing to teachers. Because if you know anything about education, it's you're planning for the full year. You have things mapped out. And when you have unknowns, and then you're paranoid or you're worried or you're frustrated, it directly translates to your students. And so I applaud those organizations and those districts and those colleges and universities that said, we're closing till at the end of the year. And therefore, a plan could be put in place as opposed to, we'll see in 2 weeks, we'll see in 2 weeks. And I'm very proud to say that many places did. But if you talk or see teachers have quit, they will say it's because nobody was making decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually hadn't thought of it that way, but it's true. My
Yeah.
school was one of those that was maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 weeks. And it was this continuation of what is happening right now because the world is chaotic. And now my job and what I'm supposed to be for these kids is chaotic. And you could really feel that across the board.
Yeah.
What do you think for the students, the learning that was, do you think that there was a big learning impact for 2020? And what do you think that was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There was a huge learning impact. Like, it's just, for adults, sure, but let's talk about student learning.
Yeah.
I think because we know that students, they ape our behavior, that we're their barometer. Depending on who was their leader and who was their instructor and who was in their circle of influence, they probably saw how people handle and respond to stress, how people handle and respond to crisis, decision-making, friendships. I think a whole lot of social emotional learning happened or didn't happen for a lot of kids. Because we're going to talk about parents who were living with this 2-week thing too. So who's watching my kids for 2 weeks? Am I working for 2 weeks? So they were bookended in their homes with frustration, stress, upsetness, and then at school. Then you saw teachers who rose above this, who said, okay, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to reach out and be a great colleague. I'm going to get online and access everything I possibly can to understand what creating an engaging online environment looks like. And my proudest moment was when I saw teachers continue to do the things that they love online. They were still reading to kids. They were still using their smartboards and standing in front of it. They were still playing movie clips and having kids do discussions. Yeah. So it was those teachers who are not just creative, but adaptable. And when I think of hiring teachers, those are the kinds of skills I'm always looking for. Are they coachable? Are they adaptable? Because you can't predict what's going to happen in the world or in education or in your classroom. And like I said, when we started talking, there are some regional things that happened that truly changed the course of many classrooms. I think we've all had a child who's experienced cancer. We've all lost a colleague. And and I'm not going to say the P word, the PIVOT word, which I hate, but that we've needed to adapt and adaptability and with a smile on your face, with learning at the forefront, with students' emotions and focus and success at the forefront. Those teachers who have that and know that, kept that, and accelerated that. Yeah. Those who really got caught up in political stuff, got caught up in, just spiraling with the complaining or just not their fault, but just the frustration. It affected students because they didn't receive the love and support that they probably needed or wanted. And then you're behind, and then you're trying to play catch up, and then your students are just feeding off of it. So I think it was, again, polarizing, 50-50. Half thrived and did amazing because of the leaders who were supporting students, and half who got caught up in the political stuff and the frustration and fighting things that they couldn't control. I always go back to what's your circle of influence. Yeah. And teachers, you can influence your student learning, and that should be your priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
So but you and I talked the other day. Some students thrived in this situation. And, I would love to know the percentages. Michael Fullen's done some great work on transforming education and how students with social anxiety, students with medical concerns, students who have been bullied were able to feel safe for the first time in their lives and in their own homes, in their own personal spaces, accessing information in a safe way without feeling looked at or targeted or that they're different than others, and they were able to do well. And, online learning I've been teaching online learning since 2006. And this isn't something that's new. It's just new to some people. And it's new to parents, because most parents today, depending on their age, et cetera, haven't experienced it. So now you've got students having teachers who maybe haven't done it before, and parents who don't feel they can adequately support their child, and political unrest and civil unrest, and our beautiful students caught in the middle. So it really is back to what education is important, which is individualization.
Absolutely.
So looking at every child, what do they need? How can they be successful? What are their strengths? Who's their support systems? And how can we meet those needs?
Yeah, 100%. I think there are so many people, like we had previously talked about, who are very gung-ho on this idea, no, kids need to be in the classroom. And while there's a handful of them that I would agree with, that doesn't mean that it's for every student. And we need to make learning equitable for all students, not just the students who thrive in a classroom. And as terrible as this pandemic is, I do firmly believe that there is something to be learned in every situation, good, bad, ugly. What do you think should be the biggest takeaway from the past 2 years that we've been in?
The big thing that I've learned is who are the kinds of people who should be working with students.
Yeah.
Who are role models? What does a role model look like? What are the social emotional traits that educators should possess? How do we get political entities to understand the money, the time, the emotions, the resources, the infrastructure needed to truly support learning on a global scale and level? There's a lot to be unpacked here.
Totally.
I'm very happy that hopefully choice continues to be something that's at the forefront. That what works for this family and this child and this region and this learning organization might not work for another one, but that they have the choice. And I'm not talking about choice of school and things like that. I want people to go to their community and local schools. Yeah. But can this child access, STEM activities? Can this student access some cooperative places where they can go and get some work skills? Can this family access their nutritional needs? Can these teachers access the resources that they needed? And the last thing I hope that's really changed is that we need to remove standardization from our education. That when you have 25 to 30 kids sitting in a room, they are 25 to 30 individuals. And if you pull out a standardized test, a text that you expect all of those learners to read and comprehend and be able to answer questions from, you are greatly mistaken. Because if you just take a grade 5 classroom, for example, you will have a student in there. And I know people don't believe me who aren't in education.
I can vouch for it.
Who is possibly functioning at a kindergarten level. Yeah. Because they don't have the letter sounds yet, or there's a learning disability, or they're just coming to a place where they're speaking a different language, to a child who can function at a grade 12 level. And on both ends, it's going to create behavior concerns. And that's not fair to everyone. That's not fair to those children. It's not fair to the other students in the classroom. So until we start to see education needing to be more individualized, more open-ended, less standardized expectations about what children are capable of doing and more about what is that child's strengths and how can we enrich them, we're going to continue to struggle. We can't, this whole let's compare everybody thing, that's totally not fair. I am impressed with a lot of the wonderful changes that have been made with regards to supports for our LGBT plus communities. Yeah. That diversity has continued to be at the forefront of discussions. Yes. People are understanding what true equity looks like, taking down the walls, not just giving people access to the same thing. That people now understand the difference between managing and leading. And those conversations need to continue. And I'm going to continue to talk about them and push them and have people talk, along with understanding that your situation will not be the same as anyone else's situation. So let's not criticize what you see. Let's be more about, tell me more about what you're experiencing and how I can help or be involved or take away some wonderful things from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made some great points about fairness doesn't mean same. It's what works for each child. And I can think of so many kids who they would come to school unprepared to learn because of the trauma that was happening at home. And if they could just have an environment that they could have a computer and learn, they would thrive so much more instead of the 30 minutes of yelling at to get on time, to get to school. It's just fair doesn't always mean same. And I think one thing that I really took away from the pandemic was I could see a student who didn't know how to read. I was able to pull them one on one online and go over things with them. And then my high kids, I could send them on with something else to do. And we would have a totally different discussion that would not happen in a normal classroom.
Right. That's right.
So
Privacy.
Yes.
Right. Because
Yeah.
when I would want to work individually with someone, the other kids saw me working individually with that person.
Yeah.
And they were listening.
Yeah.
And they were judging. Whereas when you consume one-on-one with someone, no one else has to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not in this environment, people don't really think about that. People don't think about that. Kids realize that they're different. And it's not a bad thing. You're just at a different level. And again, if you're not in education, that's not something that's going to come to the forefront. If you don't have a student that is low, then you're not a parent that's going to worry about your kid being bullied. It's this whole new idea of making learning equitable to all means more than just giving them curriculum.
Yeah.
You know?
And that the other thing we've seen is that anything is possible. We can get kids caught up with intensive supports when you have, not just people in education that rose to this. School support counselors, school psychologists, nurses, the beautiful people working in kitchens and custodial. These people, our people, educators, rose to the challenge to create more safe places for kids to thrive, whether online, with their family, getting them supports, or the custodial work to get our schools ready for kids to come back. That's something I will continue to make me smile about, is how everyone saw how they could contribute to getting kids back together to learn. And the big thing I hope is that people don't say back to normal. I don't wish it to go back to what it was. If we went back to what it was, then we're going to continue to have the same concerns. We know that silly saying about, if you continue to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's insanity. We can't expect anyone to change overnight. We can't expect things to be fixed with money immediately. This is going to take a long time. But we have seen that change is possible, and that we don't have to treat everyone the same, that everyone can be treated equally, but with what they need. And some families need more, some students need less, some teachers need this, and some students need that, and that's awesome. But again, it goes back to leadership being invested in their school and their school community. And we've seen that. We've seen some incredible people step up, and organizations. And that makes me really proud to be in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a crazy time right now, but I am hopeful that the future of learning is bright. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been incredible. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, so the big one is on TikTok. I'm Dr. Zeisner on TikTok, and I mostly talk about education or my dog. On Twitter, I'm Principal Zed, Z-E-D, where I share a lot of research and information about educational leadership. And then Instagram, it's C Zeisner, etc. And then I have a YouTube channel where I post most of my videos and I do some lives. So the best thing I've been doing is, believe it or not, is using Pinterest. I know that it's, normally for a certain group of people preparing for parties and stuff, but because our followers are incredible, we've created an incredible Pinterest page where people can access educational resources for parents, for learning disabilities, for literacy, for classroom management behavior. And we continue to grow that page, and I'm very proud of it, because often you get a lot of people saying, well, what is can I have a template? Can I have an idea? And then we just go to Pinterest, Pinterest. So I think it's C. Zeisner on Pinterest as well. I'm very proud of that resource
That's
page.
incredible.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
I will link everything.
Yeah,
Thank you,
awesome.
everyone, for listening to The Future of Learning. Go do something positive today. And thank you, Dr. Zeisner.
Thank you, Kenzie.